This is going to be our last set of notes in our first unit. We're going to name this unit 1.6, and we're going to be talking about the different angle measurements that you can have. Okay, so let's start with adjacent angles. I think adjacent angle is the easiest one to spot, easiest to remember. Basically, when you have something that is adjacent, they are going to be next to each other, right? When you talk about your adjacent neighbors, we're talking about the neighbors that are to the right or to the left of you, not the neighbor that's across the street necessarily, but we're talking about right next to each other, so left or to the right. So when you have angles that are adjacent, they will look something like this. Okay, you guys should be somewhat familiar with that. We were looking at these for our last set of notes, right? And basically all it means is that angle one, I'm going to name these, angle one and angle two are next to each other. They share a common side. Okay, that's important. The side here, right, would be this ray in the middle. This would be the side of the angle that they both share. All right, let's talk about vertical angles. Vertical angles are angles that are across from each other on intersecting lines. They are always congruent. Okay, so I'm just going to draw an image of what that might look like. So we have two lines that are intersecting. The vertical angles are opposite to each other. So if this is one angle, this would be the vertical side. And I did arc marks because they are always congruent. Okay, if this is 80 degrees and this is also 80 degrees. Okay, same thing with the other two sides of the angle. Okay, right here. If this is vertical to this angle, which they are, then they are congruent. And let's say this is 100 degrees, so this would also be 100 degrees. Okay. A linear pair. They're two angles that are adjacent and supplementary. They form a straight line. So here we're adding adjacent, and we're going to talk about supplementary in just a minute, but let's go ahead and draw what that might look like. So we have a line. Here's our straight line, and then you'll have another angle, another ray coming out where it's cutting this larger 180-degree angle in half, right? And cutting it into not in perfect, not congruent halves, but they don't have to be congruent, but it's cutting it somewhere down the middle. So now we have two angles that make up 180 degrees. So for example, if this is 60 degrees, this has to be 120 degrees if it is a linear pair. Let's look at supplementary because we kind of just talked about that in our last example. I have little sayings for these two, and I'll explain them once I go over them. But a supplementary angle is two angles whose sum is 180 degrees. So we can draw a line right here, and I'm going to make it very similar to the one up here. This is 180 degrees. So let's say this is 60, then this has to be 120. Okay, well, that's very similar to the linear pair, but the difference between the two is that they don't have to be next to each other. We have a line and we have these two lines going through it. Okay, and they might say that this is angle one and this is angle two. I'm sorry, this is angle two up here. And they say that angle one and angle two are supplementary angles. So that means that both of these angles have to add up to 180 degrees. They're not a linear pair because they're not sharing the same line and adding up to 180 degrees. Or, I'm sorry, they're not adjacent, right? These are not next to each other. There's this space in between them. So, but they do add up to 180 degrees, so they are supplementary. So these two would be examples of supplementary angles. And I'm going to add some numbers here. Let's say that this one was 60, and then this one would have to be 120 if they're supplementary. All right, we have a complementary angle. Complementary angle are two angles whose sum is 90 degrees. So we know what a 90-degree angle is, right? We see this right here. And if we draw a line through that, then we can say that angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary because they add up to 109, I'm sorry, add up to 90 degrees. Same thing with complementary angles. They don't have to be adjacent like the linear pair does, but they oftentimes are. A lot of times a 90-degree angle, I'm sorry, complementary angles are often adjacent, but that's not a set rule that they have to be. And one last thing I want to add is some little sayings that you can add to your notes to remember the difference between complementary and supplementary angles. Oftentimes they get confused because they're not really words that we use. But so one way we can remember complementary is complement on what is right. So, for example, if you compliment someone on their hair, you're not going to compliment them if their hair looks messy, right? You say, "Oh, their hair looks nice. It looks right. They did it right when they walked out the house." So, we're going to compliment on what is right. The next one is going to be for supplementary. We're going to supplement to get it straight. So one way I like to think about this is, let's say you are iron deficient, or so basically your body is not getting enough iron, or your body's not getting enough vitamin C or vitamin D. Oftentimes we take supplements to make our body balanced, right? To get everything straight the way it should be in our body. So supplement to get it straight is going to help you to remember that use supplementary angles for angles that make up 180 degrees or a straight line. Doesn't always have to be a straight line, but 180 degrees is often referred to as a straight line. So just one thing to kind of help you remember that.